Max Verstappen's future at Red Bull has entered a completely different phase as the Formula One summer break begins. His contract still runs through 2028, but the performance-related exit condition in that agreement has now been activated. The important point is that Verstappen has not automatically left Red Bull, and there is no confirmed contract with another team. Instead, he now has the contractual option to leave for 2027, with a reported deadline in October to formally notify Red Bull if he wants to exercise it. That gives him several months to study exactly where Red Bull is heading before making what could become the biggest driver decision of the current Formula One era. The situation was shaped by several races, but Silverstone became particularly important. At the British Grand Prix, Verstappen suffered another technical problem involving the rear wing. The wing failed to fully close when the car entered its straight-line configuration, leaving Verstappen with reduced rear downforce. The instability eventually contributed to his spin at Stowe and his retirement from the race. Verstappen himself compared the problem with the earlier issue in Austria, saying, "The same as Austria, the rear wing just doesn't fully close." That was a serious problem for Red Bull because the Austrian Grand Prix had already exposed similar weaknesses. The team eventually moved away from the experimental rear wing specification and returned to an older design while investigating the issue. But by then, the damage had already extended beyond one technical failure. Verstappen's championship position had also become important because he could no longer finish the relevant summer break period inside the top two, which was the condition connected to his exit mechanism. However, triggering the clause does not mean Verstappen must use it. This is the distinction that has been lost in much of the speculation. The clause gives him an opportunity, not an obligation. He can still remain with Red Bull if he believes the team can return to championship-winning form. The reported October notification window therefore gives Red Bull something extremely valuable: time to change Verstappen's mind through performance. Every race between now and that deadline becomes part of the evidence. If Red Bull introduces successful upgrades, fixes its reliability problems and begins regularly fighting Mercedes and McLaren, Verstappen could decide that staying is the smarter option. But if the performance gap remains, the argument for leaving becomes much stronger. And that is where the bigger driver market story begins, because Mercedes is no longer the obvious destination it once appeared to be. For several years, Mercedes was the team most closely associated with Verstappen whenever his Red Bull future became uncertain. Toto Wolff had openly acknowledged his interest in the four-time world champion, and there were periods when Mercedes appeared to have a potential opening. But the situation has changed dramatically. George Russell's future is secured through 2027, while Kimi Antonelli has developed into one of the leading young drivers of the new generation. Antonelli is no longer simply a promising rookie or Russell's young teammate. He has become a genuine championship contender during the 2026 season. That creates a major problem for any Verstappen-Mercedes scenario. Mercedes already has a highly competitive young driver and an established driver whose position is secure. There is no obvious reason for the team to break that structure simply to make room for Verstappen. This is why McLaren has increasingly become the more interesting alternative. McLaren already has one of the strongest driver pairings in Formula One with Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri. Both have played major roles in the team's recent success, and Piastri has a long-term agreement with McLaren. So if Verstappen were to arrive, the question would immediately become, who leaves? McLaren CEO Zak Brown has publicly rejected the idea that the team is preparing to remove either driver. When asked about Verstappen, Brown said, "I'm very happy with my two drivers." That position makes sense from McLaren's perspective. The team has built a successful partnership between Norris and Piastri, and there is no obvious sporting reason to destroy it. Piastri has also made his position clear. He has said, "I'm very happy with where I am," while pointing out that the contract is in place as well. Those comments are important because they show that, publicly, Piastri is not preparing for an exit. McLaren is backing him, and Piastri is backing McLaren, but this is where the rumors become much more interesting. Planet F1 has reported that Verstappen and McLaren have allegedly reached the closing stages of discussions over a potential agreement, with reports suggesting a possible 3-year deal. These claims remain unconfirmed. There has been no official announcement from McLaren that Verstappen has signed, and there has been no official announcement that Piastri is leaving. That distinction matters enormously. Even if Verstappen has decided that McLaren is his preferred destination, McLaren cannot simply remove Piastri from the team without dealing with his existing contract. And because Piastri is already a proven race winner and a major part of McLaren's recent success, any decision involving him would require a serious contractual and sporting calculation. That is where the Piastri-to-Red Bull theory enters the picture. One reported scenario is that Verstappen could move from Red Bull to McLaren while Piastri moves in the opposite direction, from McLaren to Red Bull. In other words, the two teams could effectively exchange championship-level drivers. Under that scenario, Verstappen would join Norris at McLaren, while Piastri would become Verstappen's replacement at Red Bull. It would completely reshape the front of the Formula One grid and create one of the most dramatic driver market moves in modern F1. But at this stage, it remains a scenario, not a confirmed transfer. There is another major connection between Verstappen and McLaren, and this one is confirmed: Gianpiero Lambiase. Better known simply as GP, Lambiase has worked with Verstappen at Red Bull since 2016. He has been one of the most important figures in Verstappen's career, guiding him through his championship victories and Red Bull's dominant years. But his own future is changing. Lambiase is set to leave Red Bull and join McLaren as chief racing officer after his Red Bull contract ends. That creates a genuine personal connection between Verstappen and McLaren. Still, it is important not to confuse the two stories. Lambiase's move to McLaren is confirmed. Verstappen's move is not. Lambiase joining McLaren does not prove that Verstappen will follow him. But if Verstappen eventually chooses McLaren, he would be entering an organization where one of the people he trusts most is already scheduled to work. The strongest argument for Verstappen leaving Red Bull, however, is not Lambiase. It is performance. The 2026 season represents a completely new technical era in Formula One. The regulations have introduced major changes to the power units, increased the importance of electrical energy and created a new aerodynamic philosophy. Mercedes has emerged as the strongest overall package during the opening part of this new era. That does not necessarily mean Mercedes has simply built the most powerful combustion engine. The FIA's early ADUO assessment indicated that Red Bull powertrains had a strong internal combustion performance figure. But modern Formula One performance is not determined by the combustion engine alone. Electrical deployment, energy management, reliability, software, cooling, chassis integration and aerodynamic efficiency all combine to create the final performance level. And in that complete package, Mercedes has been stronger. For Verstappen, that is what matters. He is not fighting for an engine statistic. He is fighting for world championships. He needs qualifying pace, race pace, tire management, reliability, and a development program capable of responding to rivals throughout an entire season. Red Bull has struggled to provide that consistency in 2026. The team remains capable of producing competitive performances, but it had reached the summer break without turning that potential into a race victory. Among the established front-running teams, Red Bull's inability to win became increasingly difficult to ignore. There is also the question of Red Bull's technical structure.